Amid the coronavirus outbreak, Philadelphia police officers have been instructed to stop arrests for a litany of crimes. And you can see them right here on the screen. All narcotics offenses, theft from persons, retail theft, theft from auto, burglary, vandalism, all bench warrants, stolen auto, economic crimes like bad checks and fraud and prostitution. Police in Philadelphia will not arrest anybody who commits those crimes now. As Ben Shapiro pointed out on Twitter, this is basically the opposite of the broken window theory. It's an invitation to criminals to commit these crimes, knowing they will not be held accountable by the law. Instead of police targeting smaller crimes to instill a sense of law and order in the community, they're creating an environment of lawlessness by telling criminals they will not face consequences for their crimes. Of course, this is what some on the radical left actually want, and they're once again using a crisis to sneak through their agenda. And of course, the American people and not the politicians will be the ones to suffer from this anarchy. With me now, senior legal fellow and manager of the National Security Law Program, Cully Stimson. Cully, good to see you.
You too. Thank you.
All right. Talk to me about the logic behind this. This is mind-boggling to me to see this document. I understand the police probably didn't intend for this to become public, but they also had to have an expectation that something so radical would become public.
Yeah, and it's not just in Philadelphia. It's across the country. I was talking to friends in San Diego recently, where I used to be a prosecutor as well. They're not making any arrests. They're making domestic violence arrests, and they're making arrests and booking people into jail for murder and the most heinous violent crimes. Other than that, you get a citation to show up. So drunk driving, burglary, you name it, people are getting a piece of paper, please show up at X date. And so it is going to descend into really bad things in a very short period of time.
I mean, this is kind of the definition of anarchy in a sense, when there's no law and order, there's no law enforcement. It really means that people aren't going to follow the laws. I mean, do you think criminals care about a little notice to appear? Not really. If they're committing the crime, they already disrespect the system.
Right. I mean, look what's happened in California and elsewhere. In California, under Prop 109, now for felony theft, you have to steal something more than $950, worth more than $950. So you have people going into stores, stealing stuff. If they get caught by the store doesn't even call the cops if it's less than $950. They just say, don't do it again. They walk away and they come back and keep stealing. So, I understand the police have concerns in the jails about the transmission of this virus. And that's a very real public health concern. The problem is that this is going to be a criminal get out of jail free card, period, because all sorts of crimes, not only the ones you listed in Philadelphia, but all sorts of other crimes are just not going to be prosecuted. And by the way, when this ends, Liz, when we get back to normal, there will be plea bargains out the yin-yang. So many people will be offered so many plea bargains, your head will spin. So many people will get basically away with so many crimes because the criminal justice system just can't catch up with all the stuff that's going to happen.
Plus, how is this going to even work? I mean, looking down the road a little bit, which clearly maybe the governments aren't doing here, which maybe they should, maybe will help bring attention to this. How are they actually going to be able to prosecute and convict and sentence people for certain crimes, say 2 months, 3 months, 4 months from now, when those people who are being accused of those crimes, and maybe they did commit the crimes, can point back and say, listen, you're not applying the law equally because you didn't arrest, you didn't try, you didn't convict, you didn't sentence those people for the exact same crime, so why should you do that to me?
Yeah, so those are what are called equal protection claims. Those will fail. The more practical reason those cases won't get prosecuted is just volume. There'll be so many cases where you just can't prove up the crime because it happened months ago. You won't have the witnesses. You won't have secured the crime scene. You won't have gathered the evidence. That those cases are just going to get flushed down the toilet, and they're just going to try to move forward. So it's going to be a disaster.
Okay, so then talk to me about the fact that the category of these crimes that aren't going to see arrest are non-violent crimes. I mentioned in the introduction the broken windows theory. That's the theory, obviously, that if you go after smaller crimes, it creates a system of law and order, and it prevents larger-scale crimes from being committed. Talk to me about the data and the studies and the research about what happens when the opposite is true, when police give basically in a megaphone, tell all of these criminals, hey, you can go ahead and commit these crimes. We're not going to book you for them. What happens not just during this interim time of extreme social distancing, but what happens to communities long term when that happens?
Well, I'm not aware of any studies that has looked at that because we haven't had that situation before. I mean, we know the studies out there on the broken crimes theory that if you arrest people, you don't put them in jail, but arrest them for minor crimes and coerce them to act in a better way, that overall it lowers crime across the board. But we have not had a situation where it's essentially Batman in Gotham City, where people are running around doing whatever they want, only to see 6, 5, whatever many weeks or months down the road where the virus is suppressed enough so that we can go back to our normal lives. And the criminal justice system just doesn't have the capacity to catch up with all these crimes that are being committed. All they're getting is a piece of paper, if they're even arrested, saying show up. And even if they show up, they might bundle 10, 12, 15 thefts, 20, 30, 50 thefts into one case, make them plead to one, which they'll take, get no jail time, and dismiss the other 49 cases. So it is going to be a really bad situation. And people have to be creative in terms of thinking about how to deal with this when the virus is suppressed enough so we can go back to our normal lives.
Do you think it would be fair to say that this is essentially a pause button on the rule of law in many cities in our nation?
I would say it's the best people think they can do given the circumstances. But I think I know criminals already know that at least with respect to serious misdemeanors and below, that they're going to get a pass.
And that's terrible. I mean, these crimes are nonviolent crimes, and I understand, of course, the difference between a violent crime and a nonviolent crime. But the way that this is being categorized makes it seem like these crimes are so petty that they don't harm people. And just because someone is not bodily harm, just because it's not assault or burglary or rape or murder or some other heinous crime, doesn't mean that these crimes don't impact people and don't harm people. I mean, you talk about theft from persons, you talk about retail theft, you talk about stolen auto, you talk about economic crimes. That means scammers essentially could scam an old lady out of her life savings, and the police aren't even going to arrest them. They're not going to do anything about it. Meanwhile, these elderly people who maybe they're social distancing right now, they don't have anything that any recourse for the fact that they've been victimized. These are not crimes without victims. There are real people that are getting hurt by these crimes. That's why they're crimes.
Right, and look at the common crime of driving under the influence. I mean, we know that tens of thousands of people die on the roads as a result of drunk drivers. In California and elsewhere now, they're not booking drunk drivers into jail. They're just giving them a citation, which gives them the green light to go out and drink again and drive again, knowing that they're just going to get a piece of paper to be held account. So we don't know, because we're early into this new way of living, what the ultimate impact will be. But I think if we check in on this every week, every month, you're going to see some very disturbing trends.
And we are going to be checking in on this as it goes, because this is not going to have pretty results. And the American people deserve to know. Cully, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it.